There are two major traditions in modern philosophy, as stated by Acuna. Rationalism, which was represented by René Descartes, Brooke Spinoza, and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, while empiricism was represented by John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume. Now that Immanuel Kant synthesized the two traditions, it's important to differentiate the two. And we can do that by using the three central issues in epistemology. That being said, what are the three central issues in epistemology? What are the differences between rationalism and empiricism? And what are the two types of knowledge claims? Hello, and welcome to Unit 2, Module 2 of Acuna's Philosophical Analysis, Rationalism and Empiricism. In theory of knowledge, you can use three central questions to differentiate types of knowledge claims in terms of formal and empirical. First, the source of knowledge. What is the source or sources of knowledge? And the second, the nature of knowledge. Given the source, what kind of knowledge can be known? And the third question, the validation of knowledge claims. How do we validate our knowledge claims? We can also use these three issues to separate the rationalists from the empiricists. But first, what does this mean in the present? All theories of knowledge must have an answer to these central issues, and any comparative analysis must come from these three issues. Starting with rationalism, they would answer reason to be the only source of knowledge, and that the type of knowledge that comes from it is inevitably formal knowledge, found in formal sciences. The rationalists accept only one theory of truth, and that is the coherence theory of truth. From here, they believe that any knowledge claims that come from the five senses are unreliable and even contradictory, or, not genuine sources of knowledge. To support this, they would state examples of perceptual illusions. Things from far away appear to be smaller than they seem. The reflection of light when a stick is half submerged in water appears to be bent but actually isn't. And the earth being flat because the ground looks flat, when in reality it's an oblate spheroid and round, etc. From these observations, they conclude that any knowledge from these sources are unstable. So what did they do? They relied on reason, which founded the formal sciences, algebra, geometry, mathematics, and logic. And these provided the model for certain knowledge using coherence theory of truth. Thus, rationalists have considered these formal sciences to be their model for their theory of knowledge. On the other hand, empiricists don't deny that reason is a genuine source of knowledge and that our senses aren't faulty. But they rather believe that these five senses are important in having knowledge of the physical world, no matter how unstable it is. They believe that it is so because it's the only way we can interact with our physical surroundings. Our world is revealed through our senses. You can't examine food without smelling and tasting it, the same way you can't tell if an item is a book by touching, hearing, and looking at it, the pages. As Hume puts it, all perceptions of the human mind resolve themselves into two kinds, which I shall call impressions and ideas. The difference betwixt these consists in the degrees of force and liveliness with which they strike upon the mind and make their way into our thought or consciousness. These perceptions, which enter with most force and violence, we may call impressions. And under this name, I comprehend all our sensation, passions, and emotions as they make their first appearance to the soul. By idea, I mean faint images of these in thinking and reasoning, that all our simple ideas in their first appearance are derived from simple impressions, which are correspondent to them and which they exactly represent. Hume states that not only sensation but also passions and emotions give genuine impression and thus genuine ideas. Also, what Hume wanted to commit to the flames are ideas without corresponding impressions, meaning he was strictly against the notion. But his statement that ideas emanate from passions and emotions were regarded as meaningless by the logical positivists that followed Hume. They only accepted the two kinds of objects of human reason, viz. Relation of ideas and matters of fact, and completely discarded the notion that passions and emotions are genuine sources of ideas. By relations of ideas, they meant every affirmation which is either intuitively or demonstratively certain. And by matters of fact, which is ascertained and evidenced in a different manner, is similar with relations of ideas. Matters of fact is conceived in the mind, which is revealed by our senses and never implies contradiction. In that sense, the opposite of a matter of fact is still possible. To recap, empiricists believe that reason guarantees only formal knowledge, but not empirical knowledge. Since math, algebra, geometry, and logic has no empirical aspects, and empirical knowledge can only be verified by the five senses. Before we move on, it is important to note that the distinctions of the two types of knowledge is made by Leibniz, which is initially called truth of reason and truth of fact. It's when Hume used it that it was called relations of ideas and matters of fact, respectively. When these two types of knowledge claims come from two sources, i.e. reason and experience, it makes sense that there are two theories of truth to validate the types of knowledge claims: coherence and correspondence theory of truth. In the 20th century, it is an accepted belief, persevered by logical positivists, that there are only two types of knowledge claims. Though controversial, it is useful and honored in classification of modern sciences, formal and empirical science. Truth of reason and truth of facts remain significant in philosophical analysis, the thing we're doing here. Today, relation of ideas is used simultaneously with matters of logic, analytic, formal, and a priori, which means theoretical or deduced. All those synonyms mean formal knowledge claims. On the other hand, matters of fact has synthetic, empirical, or a posteriori as synonyms that mean empirical knowledge claims. With these in mind, we use analytic and empirical statements in representing the two knowledge claims. Another key point that differentiates the two is that denying analytic statements imply contradiction, and denying empirical statements implies possibility, not contradiction. So what are the differences between rationalists and empiricists? In summary, rationalists accept reason as the only source of knowledge, which provides formal knowledge as their type of knowledge. And when validating knowledge claims, they only accept coherence theory of truth. On the other hand, empiricists accept both reason and experience as sources of truth, and thus accept analytic and empirical as types of knowledge. In validating knowledge claims, they accept both correspondence and coherence theory of truth. In learning more about philosophical analysis, you will tackle two types of arguments, analytic and empirical. So, you have learned all about the three central issues in epistemology, the differences between rationalism and empiricism, and the two types of knowledge claims. That's it for today, and see you all next time. Bye!